Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. This is another episode of Wireframe, and today we're going to be talking about Figma's IPO. Yeah, so I woke up this morning, I saw the news on the phone. I was like, oh, yep, here it comes, right? We all knew it was coming, folks, right? We've been looking at the news for several years now. You know, we had the Adobe potential acquisition that was banned by the EU, I think it was, and then there was some murmurings about IPO a few months ago. Here it is. They did the actual filing apparently now, and we're going to talk about it. And in order to talk about it, because I don't know much about IPOs or any of that kind of business-related stuff, I'm going to look at an article that explains some of the finer points. In fact, I just found this through a Google search, and one of the first things that came up was an AOL page, which was really interesting. Remember AOL back in the day? Maybe you're too young to remember, whatever. But anyway, AOL, they had a news report on a few things here. I'm going to show you what the post looks like, but I'll come back to me and I'll just kind of read it out for you folks. So this is the post here that we're going to be talking about. It is Figma has filed for an IPO. Here are the 7 key takeaways with a photo of Dylan up on the top here. So I really like the idea of having 7 key takeaways to speak about what's going on here, especially, you know, because there's going to be a lot of news out there and lots of paragraphs. Getting to the finer points, I think, is going to be really important. So I'll bring it back to me so we don't look just text the whole way through. But the first thing they're talking about here is exceptional revenue growth and profitability. Apparently in 2024, Figma reached a revenue of 749 million, which is up 48% from the year before. In Q1 of this year, 2025, revenue grew 46% year over year to $228.2 million. And the income for the quarter tripled to 44.9 million, up from it's too many millions, people. It's just too many millions of dollars that are going into Figma. The last bullet point in this section says Figma was profitable in 2023, but reported a large net loss of 732 million in 2024 due to a one-time employee stock compensation event. So not from ongoing operations. And then they returned to be profitability in 2024 and into 2025. So they had a little bit of an event, which I forget what that was. I think that was probably reported back in the day in 2023 or later. But yeah, they're profitable. That's basically what they're saying here, is that the growth and profitability is significant, which causes a good reason to do an IPO like this. Number 2 is massive market reach and customer base. We know this, right? Figma has obviously taken over the design world by storm. They have 13 million monthly active users as of earlier this year. 95% of Fortune 500 companies use Figma, and they claim that 2/3 of the users are not professional designers. So that could be people who are amateur designers, right? Just kind of launching a Figma website and going to town on that. Or it could be developers using this stuff, PMs using this stuff. I mean, especially with the AI features that they've been putting into those things, you can imagine that there's lots of people who are like to try this stuff out and how you get these active users. Now, that last bullet point is really interesting. As of March 2025, Figma has had 1,031 customers contributing over $100,000 annually, with some additional stuff in terms of its growth. So that means that over 1,000 customers have been contributing over $100,000 annually. So the thing that I'm not sure about this is it each individual customer contributing that, or is that the total? I'm assuming it's each individual to get over that, because I've also known that some of the contracts for these Figma licenses are like out of control. I've talked to a couple of leaders in the design space on larger companies, and they actually have told me that the Figma contract and the number of seats usually ends up being this convoluted war of trying to, spend more money on Figma for different features and other stuff that, unfortunately some people aren't even using. So it's possible that this is individual customers, but I'm not entirely sure. Because the next bullet, the next underneath that says 11,000 customers contributing over $10,000 annually. So yeah, I guess it has to be per customer. I'm assuming that's what that means. The number 3 thing over here, IPO structure and leadership control, is basically talking about who owns Figma. And I'm not going to read the whole thing about this because it seems a lot of bit of some legal jargon, but generally speaking, it looks like Dylan owns the vast majority of the power for Figma, whether it comes to voting and other financial rights. There's a little bit of ownership for Evan Wallace, who was co-founder, CTO up until 2021, but overall, it's mostly in Dylan's hands. And number 4 here, it says financial health and use of proceeds. Figma reports minimal debt and only having a resolving credit line, and the proceeds from the IPO are expected to support global expansion, R&D, AI innovation, enterprise integration, and possible acquisitions. And they actually talk in the next section here on number 5 about a little bit of the AI thing. So in number 5, strategic positioning and competitive landscape, Figma's S1, so the document that they filed, mentions AI hundreds of times. Okay. Sure, right? Like we see this wave of AI that's happening across our landscape. AI is being injected into lots of stuff. And for a company at the position where Figma is, especially, we've already seen them attempt AI in a few years between, the attempt in, I think it was 2024 where they tried and it kind of didn't really land. We have now Figma Make in 2025. AI is definitely coming in full steam in terms of the design realm. We've even seen its competitors like Lovable and Subframe coming out and on trying to build upon this. So AI really has to be one of those core things that they're going to be focusing on. And then it explains a little bit more about Figma and what it does, which is a little weird in here because we already know. And then also, I guess it's not known for everybody, but that's what this next bullet point is talking about, being cloud-based, multi-user collaboration, real-time, et cetera, et cetera. But the next one is talking about the failed $20 billion acquisition from Adobe that was blocked by regulators. And that was basically shaping some of the expectations for this. Number 6 is talking about liquidity and employee morale. 2024, the tender offered employees and executives to sell shares of pre-IPO, which is probably that 2024 event. And apparently Dylan sold 20 million in shares during that event. Wow. And then finally, number 7 here, IPO details and market context. Figma will list on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker FIG. The number of shares and price range have not been disclosed. The IPO is expected to raise $1.5 billion, potentially making it one of the largest tech IPOs of 2025. So that's some interesting stuff overall. So what's my take on this? Well, first off, like I said, I'm really not a financial person. I don't know much about shares. I have some from companies that I work for. Will I be buying Figma shares? I don't think so. But the reality of it is that this is really interesting because you don't hear a lot about design tools like IPOing like this. Even Sketch, remember Sketch back before we had Figma? That's never IPO'd. That didn't ever get an opportunity to do that. That was private invested for a long time there. And Sketch is still around, by the way. I also looked at Canva recently, just as a preparation for this news. They're also not IPO'd either, and they are also a significant player in this space in a different, I guess, vertical, right? Because the Canva folks are less design inclined and more looking at templates for different like print materials and other crafting kind of ideas generally, right? It's not to say that you can't use it for other things to do design, but it's a different I guess, design space that's working in there. And again, they haven't IPO'd either. I would say that Canva is probably the closest company in the design world to Figma's, I guess, influence overall. But again, I think it's still a vast difference between those two things. And the other thing, I guess, to mention is too, is that like Figma is very unique in the way that it introduced itself to the world overall. And I say this all the time of how it kind of put Sketch in its place for two reasons. One of those reasons was the ability to share your design immediately with a link, right? To do that with Sketch, you had to have other products in the pipeline just to share this design with somebody else, right? In the world of the internet, it's all about links and sharing. So to have some workflow that didn't allow you to share something is like not great. We had Google Docs for a long time, things like Dropbox. Sharing stuff with people is really important, especially in, a work-related scenario. So when Figma put itself as the one-stop shop to create a design and then share it, that's huge. What's even larger or more impactful was absolutely that plugin ecosystem, right? While yes, Sketch had an ecosystem that you could add plugins and things like that, it was very inaccessible to many people who wanted to make the plugins, right? Most of us that are working in Sketch or working alongside someone who's using Sketch are usually web-based people, right? Web developers, webmasters, whatever you want to call them from years ago, right? So we're familiar with web technologies. Having a plugin system that was, again, not close enough to those web technologies made it really hard for anyone that wanted to enhance the Sketch ecosystem. So they didn't really do it, right? There was only a few plugins that you could use, and even ones that, only worked halfway, which weren't great for the ecosystem either. But when the plugin system for Figma was kind of finally realized and adopted, that really blew it up, right? Because any place that you can have this creativity space and then enhance it on top of that with your own kind of, expectations and features and functionality, that's huge too, right? So both of those things, I think, are the biggest parts of why Figma as a platform succeeded over a thing like Sketch or even, Adobe XD, which is rest in peace, I guess. So now, all of that being said, though, I also do believe that many of us rely too heavily on Figma in lots of different ways, right? So one of those ways, of course, is that when we in UX engineering look at some certain designs and we'll go, hey, can we do it a different way because the web supports this kind of direction? And sometimes some of the pushback we get was, well, Figma doesn't do that. It's like, hold on a second, what does the user actually see, right? Because the user is going to see the code. That's the source of truth. So trying to replicate it in Figma and banging your head against the wall of trying to make that work seems like a lost cause, seems like a waste of time, right? When we could just do it in code. So a lot of the, I guess, feelings or I guess I'll call it feelings against Figma that I have is really a matter of like the amount of time that we spend in Figma just so that we do effectively the same work in code afterwards, right? Where, again, I feel like there's a lot less emphasis on the UX that we're supposed to be having in our applications, and we end up focusing too much on the UI and the prettification of this stuff that then gets translated either well or maybe poorly into applications, right? When in reality, if you have this truly collaborative nature where a designer and developer are working together to a common goal, then you need less of what Figma is trying to provide, right? I mean, I always say this, if I was leading a design organization, I would highly consider dropping the Figma license in favor of, wireframes and other tools that would highlight the UX of the whole thing. And that's a real hot take, clearly, because stakeholders really like the polish that a UI could provide. So I'm really interested to see if there's any other avenues that, again, reduce the fidelity and increase the user experience focus. That's why I used to talk very highly of a tool called Wizard, which was bought by Miro. So Wizard, which is Wizard, would effectively take your wireframe that you've created and have the data for your design system, put them through what is a very early on AI process, and you would get a high fidelity version using your design system of the wireframe you provided, such that a stakeholder can go, yeah, that looks, good. It looks like our, brand because it uses a design system, but it aligns with the UX principles that we found through research and, of course, finally wireframing. So I think that process is exactly what teams really need. Not, again, focusing so much effort on the UI inside of Figma just so that it gets, a one-for-one kind of thing in code. I think there's an opportunity to interpret. Although, again, the other problem is that we have a whole bunch of full-stack developers out there who have difficulty interpreting, right? That's why I always advocate for UX engineers, but, UX engineers aren't as well versed in creating an entire full stack application as a full stack developer would. So totally understand, what the reality of the whole thing is and why we're sitting where we are. But like I said, if I had a little bit of power to make a change, that's the kind of change that I would make, right? I would make a change such that it would reduce the reliance on Figma in favor of other tools that I think would get us there with a better product. But look, you know what? Good job, Figma. Congratulations for the team on the IPO. I'm sure you're going to be doing a lot of rolling in dough and Mr. Moneybags over there because you guys have been doing really good overall in terms of the impact you've had on design. It is something that you cannot deny. And I can only, imagine how it feels to succeed that way with a company in the creative field. It's really cool. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Play nice in there, and I'll see you in the next show. Bye.